Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Leonard Lehrman, and this is Dwight Peltzer, and we're sharing the program tonight. Last time, Dwight had it all by himself, and I started asking questions, and he said, "Hey, I'd like you to come and be my interlocutor and share the program with me and have a conversation." So that's what we're having tonight, is a conversation about great musicians that one or both of us, mostly both of us, have known. And we're going to be telling stories about them that we hope you'll enjoy. So Dwight asked me first to start the program with the one piece of live music that we're going to have. The rest of it's going to be on CD. And this is a piece that has only been performed in this room. It was written, dedicate this piano, which Billy Joel donated in 1997. And I wrote the piece for the dedication. It was done then. It was done at our Willard Roosevelt Centennial Concert in 2018. And it's the only time it's ever been performed. It's never been performed anywhere except in this room on this piano. But it's called For Oyster Bay, East Norwich, Public Library. And it's based on the musical letters of those words. Right? So it's F, or O-A-Y, and then S. S is E flat in German, right? You know, Bach, B, A, C, H. He wrote fugues on that because B in German, B flat is B and B natural is H, and E flat is S. So Bach and Schumann and Baird all wrote music using musical letters. So I was running in that tradition. Right, Steve? So this is for Oyster Bay East Norwich Public Library, based on those notes. It's a kind of a row, and then it goes backwards and upside down, and traditional serial music. And I'm playing this at your request, right? And after that we'll be talking and listening to recording music. So this is the one live piece for Oyster Bay East Norwich Public Library. Before we listen to a piece of Otto Luening, Dwight, you want to say something?
Yes.
Please.
Well, first of all, don't pay attention to my voice. I'm having a problem. But I'm going to talk about Leonard. I heard that he was a research person at the desk upstairs, and I heard that he was a composer. And I didn't know what I was looking into? I couldn't tell. So I said, I came in and he said, oh, you're Dwight Peltzer. And so he said, I would like to somehow to work together. And I said, would you give me a CD of yours? And I took it home and I put it on and I sat and I listened to it and I leaned forward and I said, my gosh, this is the real thing. What a wonderful musician and pianist and composer. And I listened to it again, and I showed it to my wife who played it. And then I played it again, and I thought, oh, this is the real thing, a real talent. And it was beautiful piano playing, and I had not anticipated. And I'm not a judgmental person, but I never know what I'm going to get to. Many times when I was in residence with a major symphony orchestra somewhere around the world, I would give a master class, and I heard lots of pianists, and I heard some good pianists. But this was outstanding, and I was so excited. So I went right down to the library, and I said, Leonard, let's work together. And thank God, he said, he will do it. I was lucky. And he is absolutely the real thing. Wonderful composer, and he's a major force on Long Island and elsewhere. You have to tell me about the Composers Alliance or whatever.
Sure.
Could you tell us?
I will, but first I want to say that you're in the presence of one of the great pianists of the world. Dwight Peltzer has had a problem with his hands since 1978. He's been unable to play before that. He had an absolutely astounding, amazing career with some of the greatest conductors several continents. And we're going to be talking about that. I should have said that earlier, but it's true.
I'm embarrassed.
Well, you know, it's nice to talk about other people instead of having to talk about
Yes, it
yourselves.
is.
I was, in fact, the president of the Long Island Composers Alliance from 1991 to 1998. And that's when I first joined the library here in 1995, March 95. I became the reference librarian here. My mother had actually recommended me sort of because she was the instructional media librarian at the City Post in Long Island University for 28 years. I've now been here for 29 years. Broke her record. But not literally. when you talk about breaking a record these days, or a broken record, you know, people say, "Do you mean the Olympics?" You know, they don't know what a record is anymore. Those are records over there, LPs that no public libraries no longer stock, but they're treasures that Dwight has done all over the world. And I've only done one LP. That was my cantata, my Roseburg cantata, We Are Innocent, which actually premiered at the Bryant Library. Apropos of the Bryant Library, please put it on your calendar next Sunday at 3 o'clock. We're not going to have a discussion or lecture, we're going to have a concert of music that I've composed, transcribed, translated, arranged, done with 6 or 8 performers, including a dancer, at the Bryant Library. And the editor of the Raoul News is here to talk to you about it. That's at Sunday, the 10th of March at 3 o'clock. Hope you'll be there too, man.
I'm hoping.
Okay, so let's hear some of your piano playing. This is a sonata written for you, I think. Otto Luening was sort of like a dean of American composers, born the same year as Aaron Coppola, who was called the dean of American composers in 1990. And he was a gentleman. I met him, and he gave me some of his music. He was a really charming man and a pioneer and a leader of American music. He wrote 6 sonatas for you.
Yes.
And he recorded all of them. And we're just going to hear the first movement of one of them. You want to talk about it first, or should we play
Well,
it?
first, I just want to say, this man, Otto Luening, was a great flautist, a conductor, opera's conductor, composer, best known for his collaboration with Vladimir Yuzachevska at Columbia University.
He's a pioneer in electronic music. But
Oh.
a beautiful opera called Evangeline, not very long ago. Just forgotten book should be revived. Okay,
And,
here it is.
yes, please, go ahead. This I recorded in RCA. I do think so. He was a wonderful man, and he came to our home. A lot of composers would come to my home and ask me to look at their compositions, and I would make very nice comments. I was always very gentle. But I also, in many cases, some composers, I told to bring their rubber eraser. And they would come, and we got out the rubber eraser, and we would erase and erase. Because you see, the problem is that a lot of composers don't realize when they're composing for an instrument, they don't realize the medium. And so they just write anything. And that always, so I did a lot of changes. But I will not tell you the compositions that I composed, which I'm not a composer.
Most of the composers we're hearing today are pianists themselves. I mean, Lukas Foss is the next one, and he was a terrific pianist. He worked with Leonard Bernstein, and I actually was in a class with him at Herbert, and I have some stories to tell. But tell us first your stories about Lukas Foss.
Well, Lukas was a good friend of mine, and I first met him when he was the conductor of the Brooklyn Philharmonic Orchestra, and he asked me to be his orchestral pianist in the parks, and I did. And then, of course, he met he knew a very powerful composer named Francis Thorne, which you will be hearing and I'll be talking about. But Lukas was very marvelous in the sense, one day he was going to conduct in New England. And so I said, Lukas, I'll go up there with you, but I'll drive you up to New England. And it was Hartford, I believe. And he spent the whole time complaining the fact that he never received the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. And he was sort of jealous about it. But Lukas was a very gentle man and very talented. And he could have been the conductor of that orchestra. But
he was in Buffalo, and he was in Brooklyn, and he was at Harvard for a year when I was studying there as an undergraduate, and he had a class where he did one of your favorite pieces, Pierre Luening. Herbert, he's recorded that, and he did it together with L'Histoire du Soldat, the Histoire du Soldier by Stravinsky, and he hired the best actors for that. That was David Del Tredici was the soldier, Sarah Caldwell was the narrator, and Michael Steinberg was the evil, the devil, the critic of the Boston Globe. He was the devil. And Lukas was genius in that way, getting that together. And I was on that program playing a trio by Ives, and clarinet, violin, and piano. I had it easy actually. But Lukas was a fun man. I got him to join Long Island Composers. And he said, I like that, he would say, you know. And we made it an honorary member, as a matter of fact. And Helene was there when we did a 75th birthday concert for him out in Southampton. We wanted to do his time cycle, which is a masterpiece, but very difficult. We couldn't quite have the personnel to do that. So we did 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, which is also a masterpiece, yeah. And it was a terrific concert. I asked him for a piece. I was at a party at his home, and I asked him if he had a piano piece that he could give me for this album. And he went to his closet, and he pulled out a piece from 1951 called President D. And it had a dedication to the name of a woman. And I asked him, who was that woman? He said, I don't remember. But I love to tell that story. But
I have one other thing to say about Lukas. The manager of the Philharmonic would have to call him on the day of a concert and say, Lukas, don't forget that you've got to get up. You've got a concert. He was very, absent-minded in a way, but what a musician he was. And I just love playing with him.
Move this ahead now. There we go. This should do it. We brought this in because the library machine doesn't have tracking. So I have to scroll through it. This should work.
Donations.
Prelude D by Lukas Foss.
He went to Curtis Institute. He and Leonard Bernstein were buddies.
Oh, yeah.
Which, of course, that when the New York Philharmonic position came up, that's how he was jealous because his buddy didn't get, he didn't
So
jump.
Lukas was born in 1922. He came to America as a boy, and actually he told me that his father changed his name. The original name was Fuchs, and his father didn't like the way that was sometimes pronounced in English. That's true, he told me that, that's why I changed it to Foss. But another composer was born in 1922, who lived to the age of 92, was a dear friend of both of ours, Leo Kraft.
Yes. Leo, I came to learn him at Lincoln Center, and excuse me, I was to record a piece with Leonard, and,
With Leonard Bernstein.
Leonard and Sam Barron of the Bach Aria group, and a cellist, wonderful cellist. And that's how I learned to record works of Leo, and we became good friends.
You
And
recorded a lot
he's
of...
you I want you to talk about.
Well, you recorded a lot of wonderful Leo Kraft music. It's a little bit long, and so he and I decided, it took hours of deliberation, but we decided that we would not play his Leo Kraft. We were going to play my Leo Kraft, only because the pieces are a lot shorter. We recorded, as part of this solo piano works by Long Island Composers Alliance members, I recorded 10 short pieces by Leo Kraft at Queens College. And I remember the 10th one took 10 takes before we were satisfied with it. So I'm just going to play you at Dwight's request the numbers 9 and 10, Spiritual, which you recognize. It's a song that the Weavers sang, Buried a Beauty to Willow. And the second and one is the last one is called Thumbs Under, and they're each under a minute. So let's find that now.
He's a wonderful composer.
You want to talk more about him?
Unfortunately, he's deceased.
So we need number 15 and 16. No, that's not it. Jump back.
He was a very listenable composer, wonderful, and a very nice person.
He lived in Great Neck, and I first met him in '89.
Yes.
Doing a concert for the Armenian earthquake victims. That was my department.
Yes.
He's a really sweet man. And he wrote a setting of a really called Ryan song too.
Yes.
Why isn't he playing? There we go. Yeah. You recognize the tune? There are seats. Thumbs under. takes. Okay. So, now, listening to rather gentle music. Now we're going to listen to a piece which is not so gentle. Don Martino. Tell us about it.
Don Martino was one of the famous serial composers in the world. And serialism means it's a 12-tone roll, which is being composed. And then with that roll, it's chromatic. We name the chromatic scale. See? You see? Right. Now that scale could be a retrograde going backwards. Or you could take the notes and you could expand them. And Don, of course, with the piano concerto, which was one of the monsters of the piano concerto repertoire. And in the meeting with Seiji Ozawa, who engaged me, unfortunately, because all the composers would ask all the most difficult scores. And but anyway, the piano concerto was the premiere at the Boston Symphony, and we gave 3 performances of it. And the thing was, it received beautifully reviews all over the world. And the Carnegie Hall, we held a competition, and they decided they would put the Martino Piano Concerto as one of the concertos that people play. And of course, it was never played.
Nobody ever picked it up. So this is the only recording of this piece. You're the only pianist that has played this. It's an amazing piece. Let's just, it's a very long piece. We're just going to listen to a few minutes of it.
But I want to tell you that Seiji, before we decided to do this piano concerto, said, Dwight, you and I are going to memorize the piece and perform it. And I said, fine. So anyway, I memorized both the orchestra score and the piano concerto.
Well, you have an eidetic memory, right?
Yes.
So he memorizes everything.
And
What does that mean, eidetic?
and every
What does it mean to have an eidetic memory?
if I look at music, I remember it. I see it.
Ah.
When a year later, I look at it in my mind. It's there.
So what happened to Ozawa?
Ozawa, every spring we were due to perform it at Boston Symphony Hall, but I got a check in the mail, a handsome check saying, Seiji's not ready to do this thing. So the next year I got another check, and Seiji wasn't ready. So we met at Carnegie Hall, and he said, let's try to go through it. And he tried, it didn't work for him. You know, this is famous conductor. And so finally he said, let's finally do it. And we did it finally in that year. And what was interesting about it, there was a huge cadenza in the middle, which is just impossible. I mean, I was all over the piano, under it, over it. So anyway, before we go on, he said, Dwight, would you play the cadenza for me again? I need to review that thing. And he would do it. And then he would say, okay, Dwight, let's go.
So he used a score. He usually didn't, but
He
for this one he
used the
did.
score.
Okay, so
But
let's listen to it.
Seiji unfortunately recently died, and I'm very sad about it because he was a wonderful colleague and one of the world's greatest. Now, one other thing I want to tell you.
Well, let's talk about it later.
in Germany. And every Saturday morning when he was a student, he would mount his motorcycle and ride up to Berlin to study with Karajan.
You talking about Ozawa?
In Ozawa.
Right.
Yes, he was
But
very
before
good.
we go on to Bernstein and Karajan, who are both very important to Ozawa, I just want to tell you my little story about Martino. I mean, he was a very, very distinguished composer. He had 3 Guggenheims, he won a Pulitzer Prize, he had all kinds of prizes, and he taught at the Midland Conservatory. He eventually taught at Harvard. When I was at Harvard, they brought him in to do a seminar on 12-tone theory. And at the first class, we had 12 people in the class, and somebody asked him, there were some very distinguished people there, like John Adams was there, and Jim Moss, and Phil Kelsey, people who made careers in music later. And one of them asked him, what music are we going to be studying in this class? And he said, I don't think we're going to be studying any music at all. We're just going to be doing 12-tone models and mathematical models. The next class, he had 2 people. And Faye Ellen Silverman, I think, joined the class because she was urged to do so with an embarrassment. I think he ended up with 3 students, and they allowed him to teach the course. Years later, he became a very distinguished professor at Harvard. That was an inauspicious beginning. You have a question, sir?
Pretty much serialism is no longer practiced much by composers.
Oh, yes, it is.
Oh, a lot. A lot.
And how much of it is performed for the public?
The problem is they don't know how to use the medium.
Well, you see,
That's the short.
the thing about serialism is that it was marked as part of a decadent era when it was started with in Germany, and there's a famous story about Leonard Bernstein giving a lecture where he played a little bit of Schoenberg. He said that was Arnold Schoenberg. Somebody opened a window, and boy did he get hell from Leon Kirshner and Earl Kim were my teachers at Harvard. They were both students of Schoenberg, and they never forgave Bernstein for that,
Oh, wow.
But the fact is that dodecaphony or 12-tone technique is a useful tool. If you're writing a piece that's entirely based on that, it can be pretty turgid, as you just heard. But using selective serialism can be very effective. Bernstein did that actually in his Quiet Place. The funeral director who does a narration, and it's a 12-tone, I suppose. And Mark Blitzstein, at the end of his life, was writing an opera called Idiot's First. There's a character who was the angel of death. He sings 12-tone rows. Not only that, he sings them in 12-tone rows made up of tritones. The tritone is called the devil in music, Diablos in Musica. And he made a 12-tone row made up of tritones to depict the Malachamovitz, the day the angel of death. So the serialism has a lot of use, sometimes in a negative way, but it really is a very useful tool. Selective serialism is something that, a term that's been coined by Jeremy Blackwood. He wrote a thesis on my first opera where I used, my first original opera was a companion piece to Idiot's First of Blitzstein, which I had completed with Bernstein's lesson. And I used a similar technique. It was called Carla, it was the name of the lady. The short story was called Notes from a Lady at a Dinner Party by Bernard Malamud. And every time this lady at the dinner party would pass a note, 12-tone row would appear. So this can be a very effective tool. So you wanted to talk about Bernstein and Karajan, and because both of them were important to Ozawa and important to you. Yes?
I will talk about Bernstein, only Bernstein, in one way. A composer named Kenneth Gaberl at the University of Illinois. I was there as an in-residence visitor, and he decided that he would write a piano concerto, and he was very close to Leonard Bernstein. So he talked to Bernstein, I would love to do it with Dwight. Well, what happened is the concerto didn't get written because Caburo died. And my manager never found a date open for me to work with him. So that's that. So that's that.
So
Okay.
you didn't work with Bernstein directly then?
Not, I knew him, of course, but I wasn't.
But you did work with von Karajan.
Oh, von Karajan, yes. I was engaged at the famous Botkenstein Festival in Austria. And I was a student of the famous Bach conductor and interpreter, Karl Richter. He's recorded most of the Bach things. And when I got my Fulbright and arrived in Berlin, he heard, or Karl Richter heard that I was in Berlin. So he made a trip to Berlin and asked me to play. And at the end, I was studying with Helmut Ruloff at the Hochschule, and he said, "You're coming right away to Munich." So I moved to Munich, and it was about 2 months when he said, "Okay, it's time." And so he knew that Karajan was at the festival conducting the orchestra. And so he sent me there, and I would perform the Brahms D minor piano concerto, which is another monster. And so that worked well. And then there was a woman there, a countess from Italy, who came to me afterwards and said, "I want you to come and live with me in my castle. And I will support your career totally. Play money."
How old were you then?
I was about 23.
Oh.
And so Karajan happened to be a friend, and Karajan was there to conduct the Vienna State Orchestra. And so the two, the Countess and Karajan, sat there and listened to my recording. And immediately after I played the Brahms D minor, he walked up to me and he said, "You're playing with me." And so luckily, I was so fortunate, he engaged me to play with the Vienna Philharmonic and perform Brahms B flat, which is a monster and a half. And most people can't figure out how to play the thirds very
Well,
good.
my piano teacher loved that piece, and she really wanted me to play it, and I was able to play it, except for those double thirds. I couldn't bring them up to speed. I tried and tried. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's a monster.
Yeah. The stories of von Karajan and Bernstein are linked to me personally, because when von Karajan died, Bernstein asked the audience of his next concert for a moment of silence in memory of a great maestro. A year later, I was conducting a small company in America, over in Glen Cove, in a production of Gallantry by that was war, a double bill with Trouble in Tahiti by Leonard Bernstein. And news came that Bernstein had died. And so I stood up and asked the audience for a minute of silence in memory of Bernstein, which was the right thing to do when we were performing this work. And the music librarian at the Hewitt-Woodbury Library, which is the repository for music in Nassau County, happened to be there. And she came up to me and she said, "Well, did you know Leonard Bernstein?" I said, "Yes, I worked with him on completing the works of Mark Wittstein." And she said, "Can you do a program in his memory?" And I said, "Sure." So we put together a program called Memories of Music of Leonard Bernstein. Helene and the co-tour soprano, Janice Septino Hills, and later Karen Harklass. And we performed that in just about every library in the country, in the county. And in fact, it was the germ of the very last concert that we gave here it was August 20th, 2019. It was just before the pandemic. And it was part of the Leonard Bernstein centennial celebration. It was the tail end of the 2 years celebrated his 100th birthday. And it happened to be my 70th birthday. So Marion Dodson, whom you all know, the program director, called the program Celebrating Two Letters, which was really sweet. We had cake. It was right in this room, yeah.
With a birthday cake.
It's a birthday cake, that's right. That's right. So we've talked about Bernstein and Karajan, and now there's a very important conductor who was very influential on Bernstein, whom I never knew personally. He died in 1960. Let's see, he was only 64 years old. His name was Dimitri Metropolis.
Oh, Dimitri Metropolis. When I was 5 years old, I lived in Minneapolis, and my teacher knew Mrs. Ahern, who happened to be the surrogate mother of Dimitris Metropolis, who was the conductor of the Minneapolis Symphony Orchestra and the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra and the New York Philharmonic. And so Mrs. Ahern arranged for me, I was 5, to play for him. And so I went, and I played Bach's two-part Invention.
At the age of 5?
Yes.
Okay.
And he said, I'm going to get sponsorship for your career. And it was wonderful. And when I was older, around, say, 15, I believe, he engaged me to play with the Minneapolis Symphony, the Beethoven first piano. That was very fortunate. And so he was a great sponsor of my career.
Did he conduct you with the New York Philharmonic as well, or only in Minneapolis?
No, Minneapolis.
Uh-huh.
But then I have one other conductor that I want to talk about.
Go ahead.
Very juicy and wet. That has to do with Arthur Fiedler.
Uh-huh.
Arthur Fiedler, the Boston Pops, would call me up and he'd say, "Hey, Dwight, want to play the Rachmaninoff Third?" The San Francisco Symphony. And I'd, sure, maestro. So then I'd do that, and then soon afterward, he'd call me and say, "Would you play a Bartok concerto?"
Which one?
The first,
Uh-huh.
and then the second.
The second is my
Yes.
favorite one, yeah.
And so every little bit, Arthur would call me and say, "Would you like to play whatever you want me to play?" And Arthur carried a briefcase with a bottle of whiskey. And before he would go on, he would open the bottle and he would pour from a flask, at least this much whiskey. And then he would become inebriated. And he said, "Oh, come on, Peltzer, have a drink." And of course, I was a young man. I was in my 20s early. And so what happened was, so he said, "Dwight, you got to play the Rachmaninoff Third with me. I want to prove to you that I can do it." So we went on stage, and he says, "Come on, Peltzer, let's go on stage." And he wobbled on stage. He sat down, and the Rachmaninoff Third piano concerto is 2 handfuls. It's gorgeous. I have never played octaves so fast as I did with Arthur.
Fiedler.
And the next concert I did with Rock, I never played so slow. And where it goes, dee 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 da da dum bum bum dee. Okay, I played it at this tempo. Dee dee.
Oh, my goodness.
So once in a while, I'd look up in my watch and I'd say, "Will I ever get out of here?" And I have one more story about Seiji. I was to play the Martino, which you heard about, and it was Friday afternoon. And I thought, well, I always love to look at someone in the audience and make eye connection. And then I was playing away like crazy with the Martino concerto, which you heard of it. And I looked out on the audience. I was shocked. The whole old audience, old ladies, were sound asleep. And I thought, oh dear, I guess I'm a terrible pianist. And so I asked Seiji when we came off stage. He said, no. Friday afternoon, what happens is that's their afternoon to get their butler and to take them in a limousine to the Symphony Hall, and they would sleep. That was the story.
So they slept on Rachmaninoff? Was that the piece you were playing, Rachmaninoff?
No, the Martino.
They slept through the Martino?
Yeah.
Play that. Wow.
And Ozawa said, don't worry about it. They always sleep.
So another conductor you wanted to talk about was Pierre Boulez.
Pierre Boulez, oh my gosh. That man was one of the great conductors, the conductor of the New York Philharmonic. And so I was called to come to Philharmonicon in Lincoln Center. And I was going to play for him the 2 piano sonatas, which are monsters.
Well, he wrote 3, didn't he?
He wrote 2.
I think there's a third one, which is the real monster.
Oh, yes, yeah,
Right?
yeah, that's right. So anyway, I played, and he sat there and he smiled and everything. And afterwards, when I finished, he walked up to the piano and sat down and said, in the second movement, he said, the contrapuntal lines go like this. And he completely reversed everything that I had done. He heard everything.
Yeah.
And what bothered me was that the orchestras would whistle and talk and everything. They were never respectful with Boulez, yes.
No kidding.
And it was very, very sad. And yet he was one of the great conductors.
I only heard him conduct once his Pleskow plea in London. It was magnificent. My brother had a story about his conducting of and singing purchase, the symphonies of wind instruments by Stravinsky. And at one point, my brother was playing contrabassoon, and Boulez stopped the rehearsal and said, you have to play an alternate fingering for that particular note in order to get that
That's
word in
Pierre.
tune. Yeah, he just knew it so well.
Oh,
Amazing. Now, in London is where I heard him, and England is where I met another composer and musicologist who was a friend of both of ours, named Wilfrid Mellers.
Oh, yes. Wilfrid was a close friend of mine, and he heard, you knew him.
Well, I have a story about him. I did meet him, and
Please,
I met with him, and I knew him, but not the way you knew him. Go ahead.
please tell your story, and then I'll tell mine.
There we go. Okay. In let me see. In 1978, I had just finished working at the Metropolitan Opera for a year, and I had completed Tales of Malamud of Bernstein, and I was interested in Sacco and Vanzetti, which was Bernstein's magnum opus that he had left unfinished. And I heard from his sister, Bernstein's sister, that she said, I think somebody in England is working on completing Sacco and Vanzetti. And she wasn't sure who it was. And William Austin, the musicologist, knew Wilfrid Mellers and suggested it might be him. So I wrote to Wilfrid Mellers and said, are you working on Sacco and Vanzetti? I'm thinking of taking a trip to England. I'd like to meet you. And he said, yeah, come on over. So he arranged for me to give a lecture at York University where he was on faculty. And he was very sweet. And I came in, I said, are you working on Sacco and Vanzetti? He said, no. And I came all the way over there, no. But I gave the lecture, and then I came back and I said to Joe Davis, what's my sister? Wilfrid Mellers is not working on it. Who is it? She said, I don't remember but he's not working on it anymore. You can work on it if you want. You can do it. So I spent 25 years and finished Sacco and Vanzetti, and it was done at the Great Barn Theater in 2001, the good piano. And 21 years later, it was done with orchestra staged by Helene's son, Benjamin Spearman, in the Bronx. And in December of 2022, it was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. That was the first work of Bernstein's Four where it was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. But that's my Wilfred Miller story. I didn't really know him that well.
Well,
Go ahead.
Wilfred was a very good friend of mine, and I heard, I played for him when he was in residence at the Bowdoin College in
Maine.
Maine, yes. And right afterwards, he says, "Oh, Peltzer," he says, "you're coming to be in my residence at York University, and please come." And so I did. And then he wrote a piece for me, which I premiered, and the piece was called, listen very carefully, Dwight's How Long?
Dwight's How Long?
Dwight's How Long?
Yes. But Wilfred was a world famous historian. He wrote a fantastic book on Johann Sebastian Bach.
Well, Music in a Newfound Land was his via to the New World, to America. And he has a whole chapter on Bernstein in that, which is why I thought that he was, the person that was probably finishing Bernstein.
Well, he also spent time in the Carolinas
Did he?
trying to look at new folk music and so on. He was very
He wrote about Porgy
versatile.
and Bess, as I recall,
But he married late, a very wealthy woman, and when we visited him later in York, Mom and I, we were good to go to dinner. And so he quickly went to his mistress, Poppy. And Poppy was a bit of a tart. And so we went, and he found Poppy, and he wanted to prove that he was still living with Poppy. So we knew better, but that was it. And he was a very brilliant, interesting man, but he was kind of naughty. But that's my story, if you will.
Right. Okay, I'm going to play a piece now by someone that we both knew, and a number of people here also knew, I think, because he was on the faculty at LIU, and that's Raoul Pleskow. This is a piece called Untitled that he gave me to perform on this CD, and then we'll talk about him.
You're a genius.
Oh.
What you did with that piece. Raoul, most of his music went in this style. He started with every piece, which went Ta-da! 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 Well, I was after playing a concert in London at the Wigmore Hall. And I had an interview with one of the BBC people, as usual, and they said, you're wonderful, I'd like to play a recording. So he opened up the case and he brought out, ta-da! And I wanted him to play the Barber Sonata, which is an absolutely wonderful, beautiful listening piece. And of course, we made friends later on, so I still have friends at BBC.
Well, Raoul was a major force at Long Island.
Yes, he was.
Member of the Voice Alliance. He did a lot of things that happened at Post because of him. He only passed away very recently, May 18th, 2022. He was 92 years old. Are there people here that knew him? Molly, you knew him, of course.
My boss.
And Steve, you knew him.
I took a course in composition from him when I was getting a master's.
Did you?
Yeah.
He was a very fine composer, very refined, and he wrote a piece for us actually on a Lukas text, which we did in Germany. We did, Helene and I did a concert in Dresden of music by a lot of composers, including Raoul. Willard Roosevelt's setting of his grandfather's letter to his father, translated into German. We did it in German. So Raoul was a real character. We enjoyed
He was an
knowing him.
interesting man. We knew him very well. He came to the house a lot. But ta-da! Kind of bothered
So, we
me.
have-
But I want to say one more composer that I want to talk about. I was very involved with John Cage. And John Cage,
No, but before you, because he's the last composer that we have on the list before.
Oh,
Francis
yeah.
Thorne, except there was one other composer you were going to talk about whom I didn't know. I met Cage once, but there's one composer that I heard so much about from Nadia Boulez, but never met, and that was Igor Stravinsky.
oh yes.
Tell us that.
Well, Stravinsky, as I may have said earlier, that when I visited him in Beverly Hills, he talked and we had dinner and we had a great time. As I think I mentioned earlier, he passed by a bottle of vodka. And I, next morning, woke up and very, very over drinking. And I was young and I didn't know what to do. But I came to breakfast and he said, "You Americans, you don't know how to drink." But he let his hair down and he talked a lot about his work. And we became good friends. I met him when I was at playing the Boulez sonatas at Aspen Music Festival.
Did you play Stravinsky for Stravinsky?
Oh, yes.
What
yes.
what music?
I played the Serenade on Law,
Uh-huh.
and I also played the piece for wind orchestra. There was a
Piano,
piece-
oh, the concerto.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, piano.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was wonderful.
Now, the thing about Stravinsky is that he went through three periods. There was the primitivist Russian period, and there was the neoclassical period where he was very influenced by Nadia Boulanger. He was very close to her. In fact, there's a rumor that they were lovers at one point. And the third period, he rediscovered or reinvented serials. He learned that after Herbert was dead, he took over the serial technique and made it his own. Right? One of the things that he wrote with that technique, as I recall, is a setting of Dylan Thomas's poem, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." He said, we were in for trombones. We had a combination. When my father died, Helene's son read that poem, and I was so moved by it. I made my own setting, which she has sung in his own YouTube. And forgive me, but I prefer my setting to Stravinsky.
Stravinsky did not get along with his son, Helene, who was at the university.
Well, the other thing about Stravinsky, and it was so exasperating because he worked with Robert Kraft, of course, and you don't know sometimes if it's Kraft conducting or Stravinsky conducting on the recording.
And Kraft is like a shadow, and he was always there.
Yeah, but we
Yes.
met Kraft, with Kraft at Cornell. I remember the seminar vividly because he talked about Stravinsky, and we blasted him. We criticized Stravinsky, and he accepted the criticism. He said a couple of things. First of all, he said that the Rake's Progress has some gorgeous music, but much of it doesn't really fit with the text. And Kraft confessed that he tried to get Stravinsky to make changes and make the prosody work better, and Stravinsky absolutely refused. He would not hear of it. For him, I mean, his first language was Russian, his second language was French, and English was only a third language, and he treated English like French. You know, he thought that the accent not better what syllable it was on, because in French it doesn't matter as much as it does. Kraft also confessed that when he recorded Stravinsky's Mavra, which I think is his best opera.
Yes.
It's in Russian, and it's beautifully written to the Russian with Agothic accents where they belong, unlike the English in Rake's Progress. Mavra is really written beautifully. But when Kraft recorded it, he did it with singers who didn't know Russian. And they sang everything equal, including Susan Belling, the daughter of Norman Belling, the cantor in Roswell. They didn't know what they were doing. And so he admitted that the recording was substandard for that reason. So there's a lot of Stravinsky that's not quite where it should be, you know, and a lot of it has to do with Kraft, you know.
Yes.
So you wanted to talk about John Cage. Go ahead.
All I want to say is.
Oh, you want to pass the score around?
John Cage studied with Schoenberg, and he did not assimilate the 12 tone. And so anyway, he wrote a lot of theater pieces and so on. But I played one of his pieces called 14 minutes and 13 seconds, I believe.
You're not talking about 3 minutes and 44 seconds. That's
Yeah, that's the one.
4 minutes and 30.
4
4 minutes and 33 seconds. That's right. You played
So
that.
I was playing it, and yes, I played it all over Europe to interesting effect. It means that the audience sits quietly, and I walk on stage and do nothing. And after about 3 minutes, a man stood up. This was in Manchester. The man said, "Hey, I'm here not to be educated. I'm here to hear you play the Beethoven Sonata, which is
It's
one of his monsters. So he said, I want my money, and he stomped out.
Oh, my.
And I thought, oh my. But John Cage has a score. Could you pass it around?
Yeah, that's what we should do, showing it around.
And John was a very talented, he was a genius, but he was not a composer. And it was well known. And one example of his work that was not accepted, he was in rehearsed with Leonard Bernstein and at the New York Philharmonic. And during the rehearsal, people would whistle, stamp their feet, do everything.
Was that the piano concerto? The Cage piano concerto?
I don't know, something. And what happened was, the violinist came up after the rehearsal and said, if you come back in 20 years, we might be courteous to you.
Oh.
And he was very, very genius. He did all kinds of staging things, and he welcomed errors and whatever. If we sat here and I said, be quiet, and you would go, and another one would stamp the foot, and another one would sneeze, and another one would blow a whistle. And at the end of that, I would say to the audience, that's John Cage's music.
Yeah, that's, yeah. His music consists of
But
reactions to nothing.
He
Yeah.
was a charismatic man, and I enjoyed him very much. When he sent the score that you see, can you show more?
Yeah.
That when he showed the score, when he sent this wonderful score to me, I think that's worth thousands of dollars. And he prepared the piano. He sent the score, and I prepared, and I did everything I could. Like I was a Mozart player, because I used to record a lot of the Mozart piano concertos in Montreal with the orchestra. And so anyway, what happened was he prepared after I finished. He said, let me show you how this is. And I prepared it like Mozart. And he sat down and duck whistles, sneezing, stamping, screaming, everything, any noise that he could make, and said, there. So I said, I get it, and I sat down the piano, and I just blew the whole thing apart. But I have to say,
And he loved it, right?
I respect John Cage. I'm very fond of him, was a good friend, but I'm glad he didn't write some piano pieces for me that were listenable. So,
Well,
John,
his prepared piano pieces are very gamelan-like.
they're interesting,
Yeah,
aren't
and
they?
I played a piece with Philip Moorhead called Music for Two Pianos, which was quite delightful, actually. It had long silences in the middle, you know. And it was really very, very, very nice, very
Yes.
charming, very early, like 48 or something.
Yeah. Would you talk about friend Thorne?
Yes, let's do that.
And they're a good friend of
We
mine.
have, yeah, Francis
And
Thorne is the last piece that we're gonna play.
finishing a concerto with him that he wrote for me.
Oh, no, this is the pop.
The Pop Martino,
Pop
you wrote
Martino.
it for me, yes.
Before we play it, you want to talk about him, or you want me to talk about him?
Well, I think that I want you, I've been talking so much, my mouth is flapping, and I think it's only fair that this genius talk.
Well, Francis Thorne was really an amazing character. His maternal grandfather was Kobe, who wrote one of the great anthologies of opera. We have it in the library, as a matter of fact. And he came from a wealthy, very musical family. And he founded a foundation to help middle-aged atone composers, including David Diamond, among others, which ran until about 1975.
He studied with David in Florence.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, we knew David Diamond. Helene and I have made the only recording of David Diamond's songs, as a matter of Diamond was an amazing composer. He said that he felt that his most important works were his symphonies, which Jerry Schwartz has been conducting recording, his quartets, which the Emerson Quartet recorded, and his songs. He wrote over 100 songs. And Helene and I recorded 25 of them. When I played a video of Helene singing for him, I said, do you have any songs that she could sing? He said, hundreds! and he sent us several dozen. We recorded 25. But so Diamond was a teacher, and then Thorne was a patron of his. And Francis Thorne also was a founder of the American Composers Orchestra.
Yes,
which is still in
Dennis
existence.
Russell Davies was the conductor.
That's right.
With
He's a
whom I
very important
played
force
several
in music,
concerts.
and a Long Islander. I got him to join the Long Island Composers Alliance.
He was he created the Walter Naumburg Foundation.
Really?
Well,
I didn't know that. Okay, that's one thing. He's an amazing character, and wrote a great deal of music, quite a bit for Dwight, as a matter of fact. And we did some concerts with him with the Long Island Composers Alliance. We got him to meet the composer grant, as we did for most composers. And there was a tradition. It wasn't enforced or enforceable, but it was a tradition that to let the Composers Alliance continue, composers that received meet the composer grants would donate part of that grant back to the organization. And we asked Francis to do that, and he refused. I said, why? And he said, I have dental bills. He said, But you know, we couldn't make him do it, so that we didn't try. My favorite experience though with meeting composers was that they sent us a form that we had to fill out saying that we thanked them and that we acknowledged the sources of their funding, including the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. And I said, oh no, we're not going to sign on to that. We'll refuse the grant if we have to do that. And they said, all right, we'll find other sources for you. You don't have to list R.J. Reynolds, but don't tell anybody else because they might do that too. That was my story with Dwight and Meet the Composer. So tell us more about Francis Thorne, and then we'll hear you speak.
Well, he wrote a lot of music for me. Piano, concerto, pop partita, and solo piano sonatas, etc., which I did in a festival in near the what was the name of the festival?
In Lennox.
Yeah. And so I did a whole recital of it, and they would talk about him, and then I would play. And he was a gentle man, and unfortunately he's deceased. But let's hear the pop.
Yeah, he lived from 1922 to 2017. Okay, so here's the pop partita that he wrote for you. About Francis Thorne, and it says that he absorbed musical impressions crouching under the grand piano while his father, a banker, played ragtime. You can hear that, right?
He also knew Herbert and Gershwin.
Yeah.
Why did he call it a Bach partita?
A pop
Oh,
partita.
pop partita.
Pop partita, yeah.
So sorry.
That's what it is, pop partita. So that concludes the musical portion.
Now, I want to say something.
Absolutely.
Aren't you, audience, glad that I found this man?
Yeah, we found
This man is just full of music in every way, enthusiasm, intelligence, a great pianist. I'm a lucky man.
It's such a pleasure to share these stories. You know, he comes to the reference desk and pulls me away and just talks and talks, and I said, well, we have to make a program. Well, obviously we did. So we have, the library won't close for another 40 minutes. So if people have questions, you know, feel free to leave or to stay as you like, but if you have questions, we'd love to answer them.
Sure.
Steve? Go ahead. Well, this is Steve Walker.
How
by the way.
about-
The director of the Sagamore Hill Band
Yes.
and retired director of music at Oyster High School.
Just curious.
How about if they turn around and face the camera a little bit? Okay, so we can take a nice picture of the person who's actually asking the
Thank
question.
It just occurred to me, I was curious whether either of you had any interaction with the other concert pianist from Oyster Bay, Lauren Hollander.
Well, I've heard him, and I have some of his recordings, but I didn't know him personally.
He lived in Mill Neck.
No
Yes.
kidding.
And
Did you know him?
he didn't go to the Oyster Bay schools, he went to private school, but his brother Nick went to Oyster Bay High School.
He was here and performed before I came to East Norwich. And the other musicians, I've, people, composers, etc. But my contacts all come through my managements, who were Rubinstein's, Horowitz, Johann, and John,
Great, Johannes.
Brent, Johannes, and Zimmerman.
I have a record album of his that he recorded live. It was a classical music concert live at the Fillmore East, where all the rock concerts were performed.
Yeah.
And he performed there a classical concert.
He's good.
Yeah.
He was
Very good.
I have a recording of him playing a piece that he wrote,
Yeah.
which is quite stunning, actually.
He's from Mill Neck.
Yes.
Is he still alive?
I don't-
He was tremendous, very good.
Yeah.
I liked him. Fortunately, I never had the opportunity. One reason is I was always elsewhere. Any other questions?
Thorne?
I have a little granddaughter back here.
Oh.
She's 9 years old.
Oh,
And I want
what's
you to
going on?
stand up, Tika. Stand up. Yes, here we go. I'm going to tell you what she's about. I'm a proud grandfather. She won an international prize in poetry, and she's published.
Wow.
Leonard, you are a pleasure.
But where is it published, in a journal, or
It's in Britain.
can we get a copy of it for the library?
I'll give you the
Okay.
address.
We have quite a poetry
She's a
collection.
fabulous writer and a poet at that age.
Bernadette Boudreau is here. She's the diva of the Island Lyric Conference. I worked with her for many years, and we just reunited for the first time in about 16 years. And I'm delighted that you're here. Do you have any questions you want to ask me?
No, I just want to say to you, Dwight, you are a gentleman and a terrific person. And Leonard, you know how I feel about you, so.
And thank you.
You are very
It's a
delightful.
pleasure to meet you, to have you here, and for me to tell stories. Fortunately, they're not misinformation, which I always have to watch. I love people. My whole mission in life is not the ego trip of being a famous pianist. Mine is to help people, and I've always done that. I've always been willing to take students, young ones, whatever age, and work with them or help. And to me, and make the audiences happy, and that's what's most important.
Are you still teaching?
I teach eventually. I haven't been teaching for a while. I'm turned to become a philosopher, and I'm writing speeches which I shall be sharing eventually about, how authors write and put together from all kinds of authors.
I want to say something about the audience and how we appreciate you and how I want to urge you to let your appreciation be known by taking out recordings and books on music from this library. Because the library is scaling back now. The major part of my profession, or my duties at the library, is to decide which books to keep and which not. And if it doesn't go out, even if it's a great treasure, I have to fight for it to be kept. And I often lose the battle. And you see all those CDs over there? They were recordings that I donated to the library over the years. And one by one, they've been discarded, they've been withdrawn, because people just don't take them out. So I want to urge you to look at our CD collection, look at our music collection, and let the library know that you as patrons appreciate those things and want them to remain and not be.
And please attend his concert.
Oh, yes.
Very important.
Yes, March 10th.
They're wonderful.